The signal was 11 characters long, and it had been sitting inside a trade beacon 40,000 kilometers off the Martian relay corridor for longer than I had been alive. I found it on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I wished I hadn't. My name is Sela Vorn. I hold the rank of Lieutenant Commander in the United Earth Fleet's Strategic Forensics Division. For 6 years, I had been the person you sent a strange signal to when no one else could read it. The beacon had been flagged by a junior analyst named Reyes who thought the carrier frequency was malformed. She was right. It wasn't malformed. It was deliberate. The 11 characters were a harvest. Ping. Cycling silently on a loop, waiting for a receiver it had been waiting for since before Reyes was born. It took me 19 hours to break the encoding. Took me another 4 to understand what I was reading. I called my section chief at 0340 and told him he needed to be in the analysis bay before 04. He asked if it could wait. I told him no. He heard something in my voice that made him stop asking. By 0600, we had pulled the full signal architecture. The beacon was not one beacon. It was a node in a network of 214, seeded across Earth's orbital trade corridors over 3 decades by Verac commercial vessels operating under standard exchange licenses. Each node broadcast a dormant activation signal on a frequency that passed through standard shielding, through walls, through hulls, through the human skull, and interfaced with a synthetic compound that had been present in a Verac dietary supplement, distributed freely at 6 trade summits between 2991 and 3003. 40 million humans had attended those summits or received the supplements through secondary distribution. The compound was tasteless. The compound was harmless in the sense that it produced no immediate symptoms. What it did over time was deposit a lattice of conductive filament along the myelin sheath of the cerebral cortex. The filament was dormant unless activated by the beacon signal. During sleep, when the conscious mind dropped its guard and the brain cycled through its deepest consolidation phases, the beacon signal activated the filament. Filament read, it extracted. Cognitive architecture, the structural logic of how a human mind organized memory, pattern, and experience, was compressed, encoded, and transmitted back to the beacon. The beacon forwarded it. We traced the forwarding chain in 6 hours. It terminated at a Verac conclave data facility in the Verath system, 41 light-years from Earth. They had been doing it for 30 years. 4.2 million confirmed human subjects. Based on distribution records, we cross-referenced against the compound's dispersal maps. 4.2 million people who had attended a trade summit or accepted a complimentary supplement packet and had spent the following decades sleeping 8 hours a night while something inside their skulls quietly transmitted the contents of their minds to a facility they had never heard of on a world they had never seen for the use of a civilization that regarded them the way a mining company regards an ore deposit. I sat with that number for exactly as long as I could afford to sit with it, which was about 90 seconds. Then I filed the confirmation report. The report was 22 pages. The appendices ran to 400. I had written reports before that I knew would matter. This was the first one I wrote, knowing that every word was a legal trigger, that the moment it was filed and confirmed, a set of pre-authorized orders would begin to execute that I had no power to stop and no desire to. I filed it at 11:47 station time. At 11:52, my display showed the first movement. The Covenant Spear had been assembled over 8 years and positioned across 4 staging systems under logistics classifications that described them as routine fleet maintenance rotations. 1,200 warships. Fleet Admiral Corvith Deal had signed the activation protocol 7 months earlier, contingent on forensic confirmation of a harvesting program of the scope and duration we had just confirmed. Protocol did not require a second vote. It did not require a communication to the Verac conclave. It did not include a grace period. At 11:52, the Covenant Spear began to move. I watched it on the strategic display for a long time. There was no drama to it. The icons shifted, rerouted, aligned. Formation designations updated. Transit windows opened and closed as ship after ship folded into faster-than-light transit. The display showed me a number in the lower right corner. Ships in motion that climbed from 0 to 400 in the first hour, and then kept climbing. By 1400, it read 1,180. By 1600, it read 1,200. The spear was complete. Somewhere in those hours, the Varak conclave sent a transmission. It was addressed to the United Earth Fleet's diplomatic channel. It was formal, measured, and bureaucratic in tone, the conclave's characteristic register shows. It asked whether there had been a navigational anomaly affecting fleet positioning in the outer transit corridors, and whether Earth wished to file a notice of movement to avoid confusion with commercial shipping lanes. The transmission was logged. It received no reply. I thought about the 4.2 million people who had slept through 30 years of extraction and never known it. I thought about what had been taken, not tissue, not blood, not anything visible, nothing that would show on a scan. The Varak had understood that the most valuable thing a mind contains is its architecture, the particular way it organizes experience into meaning, the patterns that accumulate over a lifetime of being human and of being exactly the human you were. They had taken that. They had filed it, catalogued it, used it. For 30 years, they had been mapping the interior geography of human consciousness, and we had called them trade partners. I did not rage. I had already finished being angry. I had finished somewhere in the 14th hour of the analysis, when the scope of the distribution records became clear, and I understood that the people affected included, among 4.2 million others, my mother, who had attended the 2999 summits as part of a diplomatic support delegation and had died 11 years ago of a cerebrovascular condition that her physicians had attributed to an unusual myelin irregularity they could not fully explain. I did not write that in the report. It was not relevant to the forensics. But I knew it when I filed the confirmation, and I knew it when I watched the spear move, and I know it now. The Covenant spear reached Varak space in 11 days. Fleet Admiral Deal's after-action summary, which I read in full, 43 pages, and written in the same forensic register I used myself. He is that kind of officer. The summary described 11 days of methodical, sequenced operations against Varak harvesting infrastructure, the data facility in the Varath system, 11 secondary processing nodes, 4 relay stations, the commercial fleet that had seeded the beacons, and the conclave's territorial enforcement apparatus, which had attempted to intercept the spear on day 3, with a force the summary described, without editorializing as inadequate. The Varak population centers were not targeted. The conclave's civilian infrastructure was not touched. It does not do that. What Earth did was remove, completely and permanently, every element of the apparatus that had run the harvest program and every institution that had authorized, directed, and benefited from it. The conclave sent 17 transmissions during the 11 days. Deal's ships did not reply to any of them. On day 12, the after-action summary noted, Varak space was quiet. I have read a great deal of history, and I know that what happened next will be written about in terms of proportionality and precedent, and the question of whether the response exceeded the offense. Those are legitimate questions, and I have no interest in answering them. I am a forensics officer. My job was to find the signal, read the signal, understand what the signal meant, and file a report that said what it meant with enough precision and enough evidence that no one look at it and pretend it said something else. I did that job. What I know is this. The Varak conclave ran a 30-year program against sleeping human civilians and called it resource acquisition. They regarded 4.2 million human minds as an ore deposit. They considered the program routine. They filed our cognitive architecture in a database and charged access fees to researchers who wanted to study how humans thought. They did this without declaration, without consent, without acknowledgement, and without any apparent belief that it would ever be found, because in their experience, the things they took from lesser civilizations were never missed. They were wrong about that. The Covenant spear has returned to its staging systems. The beacons have been recovered and deactivated. A medical team is working through the confirmed distribution list, and there is a treatment protocol now for the filament compound. It cannot restore what was taken. The Varak conclave has not sent a transmission in 4 months. I do not expect them to. I still work nights. I still read signals that other people find strange and cannot place. Last week, Reyes, the junior analyst who flagged the beacon in the first place, asked me whether I thought the Varrock had fully understood what they were doing, whether they had known, when they designed the program, that a mind is not a commodity, that taking the architecture of a person's consciousness without their knowledge is not resource acquisition, that it is something else entirely, something for which they do not appear to have a word. I told her I didn't know. I told her it probably didn't matter. The conclave knew what they were taking. They knew we slept. They knew we were unaware. They built a program around that unawareness and ran it for 30 years. And I think the truest answer to Reyes's question is that they believed our unawareness would be permanent, that we would never be the kind of civilization that looked carefully enough at a malformed carrier frequency on a Tuesday morning to understand what it meant. That was their only real mistake. Everything else that followed was ours.